Right now, we have Ambassador David Hale, former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and former ambassador to Pakistan, Lebanon, and Jordan. Ambassador, welcome to you. You heard the reporting, I presume, from Matt Bradley talking about what's going on. There's a lot of people crying. They're mourning the death of Hassan Nasrallah. Is that something that you would expect, given that his prolonged fiery rhetoric and leadership of Hezbollah over 30 years is what helped to invite the rockets that would land in Lebanon and take out neighborhoods and kill innocent people? Was this a popular figure for he himself and who he was?
Well, thank you very much. I think Matt's reporting was quite accurate. Although I would say it's important to emphasize that the view of Nasrallah inside Lebanon depends who you ask. It's a deeply divided country along sectarian lines, as well as pro-Iranian versus pro-Western alliances. So the attitudes fall along those fault lines. I suspect he's dominated the Shia community since he first came to power when his predecessor was assassinated by the Israelis in 1992. And he has offered them an inspiration to a community that has never really been very welcomed into the Lebanese context. So that's what's happening there. But on the Christian and Muslim, Sunni Muslim side, it's a very different set of reactions. And there are people who have, I think, in Lebanon been scratching their head as to why it is that Hezbollah had been conducting this war on behalf of Gaza and Iran that had no real Lebanese interest.
Can you answer that question? Why was Hezbollah doing that?
Well, they've been answering to Iran since day one. People forget this organization, Hezbollah, was founded by the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, as a reaction to the Israeli occupation in the early 80s. So this is a long-standing link. They are many other things too, and they are a Lebanese political, social, and religious organization. But at heart, they respond to what Iran wants them to do.
Are you concerned that this could be a tipping point for a broader war in the Middle East?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't exclude any contingencies, but if by wider war you mean, will the Iranians come into this in a very direct way? I would estimate not. And after all, based on what we've seen, the attack in Damascus earlier this summer, late spring, when they lost many of their commanders and they reacted with a barrage of missiles and drones into Israel, which Israel and its neighbors in the United States successfully parried, intercepted. So I think the Iranians stepped back because they prefer to see their proxies rather than Iranians themselves taking on the fight. So you may see more. In fact, I'm sure you will see more attempts by Hezbollah to penetrate Israeli defenses, but so far they've been unsuccessful. And of course, they are now decapitated, not just Nasrallah, but deep ranks of their military leadership and their command and control are either assassinated or run to ground.
Ambassador, Israel's playbook has reportedly been escalate to de-escalate. But NBC's Andrea Mitchell reports at an Israeli briefing yesterday, an official was asked if getting Nasrallah would mean a ceasefire, and the briefer said, no, when you have momentum against the enemy, you don't stop. So what is Israel's goal here?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the phrase escalate to de-escalate. I think what we're seeing is, personally, is a number of things. I mean, one is after October 7, there is an entirely new mindset in Israel about a never again mentality. Never again do they want their people to live in the shadow of terrorism and violence. At any morning, they may wake up and see what they saw on October 7 on any one of their borders. So this is a major factor. Second, their national security strategy before October 7 failed them. And so they're now groping for a new national security strategy. And we're seeing what they've been preparing in Lebanon probably for a long time. But this is a new approach, which doesn't care about public opinion outside Israel. It cares about results. And third, they need to effectively make a decision at some point whether or not and when they can return 60,000 Israeli civilians who've been displaced from the north to return to their homes. And no cabinet, no coalition, no prime minister in Israel is going to make that decision so long as there's a possibility that fighting may resume in the weeks and months after that. The only alternative is for the United States to provide a diplomatic path that offers a credible answer to the security and stability dilemmas faced by the Israelis, and that has not been forthcoming so far anyway from Washington.
Well, to that end, at the United Nations General Assembly earlier this week, the U.S. and allies said they believed that they had a deal for a 21-day ceasefire, but it was then later rejected by Israel. So what can the U.S. do diplomatically if they can't get their strategic ally on board with any attempts at a pause in fighting? Not to mention the other side in negotiations, Hezbollah now, it has a vacuum at the leadership top.
Well, Hezbollah may have a vacuum at the top, but the answer to Iran, and there's no vacuum in Iran. It's the Iranians that are the problem. The answer never was in Beirut. The address is Tehran. And the United States' offers simply so far have had difficulty proving relevance to the problems of the moment. There are new realities, and these ideas are based on old think. These are stale ideas of the past. Why would Israel accept a pause in the fighting when they have momentum on their side and they're finally restoring deterrence based on a promise that an administration in its twilight weeks might be able or might not be able to launch negotiation? So, of course, the Israelis are looking at this and saying they're going to have to take the matters into their own hands. The United States can offer ideas based on new realities, but they have to reflect that never again mentality in Israel on the one hand, and they have to take advantage of the fact that finally we are seeing the reestablishment of deterrence against Iranian proxies in the Levant.
Ambassador, do you envision a scenario where the United States gets drawn into a war in some fashion? We do know that the U.S. is sending more troops right now to the region to help stabilize things.
The announcements I saw from the administration reflected, I think, the prudent thing to do of ensuring that we have our embassies well defended and protected, and that our military personnel that have been deployed to help Israel defend itself are also fully protected. These deployments, as best I understand, and I'm, of course, out of government now, are not going to be offensive in nature, and I would not expect the United States to conduct offensive operations of any nature, particularly in Lebanon. We tried that 40 years ago and was not very successful. Instead, we may join, as necessary, in the air defense of Israel and, of course, continue to provide the supplies of weapons and technology that Israel is relying upon to protect its people.
Former Ambassador David Hale, I very much appreciate your insights. I hope you'll come back and join me again.